The wind moved through the broken ruins, carrying dust and the smell of rusted metal. Old stone walls stood like broken teeth, sharp against the dying light of evening. A human traveler walked slowly, his boots pressing against shattered ground. His name was Daniel, a soldier who had left the war but could never escape its scars. He came here to search for supplies, maybe weapons, maybe food, or maybe answers he did not know he was looking for. The ruins were dangerous. Sometimes alien, raiders hid here. Sometimes wild creatures claimed the empty streets. Daniel moved carefully, holding a small flashlight in one hand and a knife on his belt. His eyes scanned every shadow, every corner, waiting for danger. The silence was heavy, but then he heard something. A faint sound, almost too soft for human ears. It was not the growl of a beast, not the cry of a hunter. It was something smaller. Daniel stopped walking. His breath froze. The sound came again. It was a whimper, a small, weak cry. He raised his flashlight, pointing it between two collapsed walls. Dust floated in the air like ghosts, and then he saw movement. At first he thought it was an animal, but no, it was a child. A very small alien child. Her skin was pale silver, her hair tangled with dirt, her large glowing eyes staring at him, like two moons in the dark. She wore clothes that were torn, too big for her body, almost like rags. She looked fragile, like she had not eaten for days. Daniel's chest tightened. He had seen children before, during war, left behind in burned villages, but this was different. She was not human, yet her small face carried the same fear and the same pain. The girl stepped back when the light touched her, pressing herself against the broken wall. She shivered, her tiny hands gripping the stones. Daniel lowered his flashlight, trying not to scare her. "It's okay," he said softly, though he knew she might not understand his language. "I'm not going to hurt you." For a moment the girl only stared, her lips trembled. And then with a voice so small that Daniel almost thought it was the wind, she whispered one word. "Help." Daniel froze. She did understand. Or maybe she only knew that single word, but the sound of it went straight into his heart. He stepped closer, slowly, carefully. The girl pressed harder against the wall, like a cornered animal, but she did not run. Her knees were too weak, her body too thin. Daniel saw the scratches on her arms, the dirt covering her skin, the fear in her glowing eyes. "Who did this to you?" Daniel muttered, more to himself than to her. He looked around. The ruins were silent, but he knew silence could be a trap. If she was here, someone might have left her, or worse, someone might still be hunting her. He crouched down, lowering himself to her level, trying to make his figure less threatening. Slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ration bar. He unwrapped it halfway and placed it on the ground between them. The girl's eyes followed the food. Hunger burned in her gaze, but still she did not move. She kept looking, at him, as if waiting for him to strike. Daniel gently pushed the ration closer with his boot, then leaned back, hands raised to show he was not a threat. Finally, with trembling fingers, the girl reached forward. She snatched the ration and pulled it close to her chest. She bit into it, fast and desperate, chewing like she had not eaten in days. Daniel's throat tightened as he watched. The crunch of food was the only sound for a moment. Then, when she slowed, the girl lifted her head again. Her lips moved, as if she wanted to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She swallowed, then tried again. Her voice was soft, broken, but clear enough. "Will you be my father?" The words cut through Daniel's mind like a blade. For a moment, he thought he had misheard her, but her eyes told him the truth, those wide, glowing eyes filled with tears. She was not asking for food. She was not asking for safety. She was asking for something deeper, something she had lost long ago. Daniel felt his chest grow heavy. He had come here looking for supplies, Now he had found a child asking for something he was not sure he could give. The ruins around them seemed to grow darker. The wind grew colder. Somewhere far away, a sound echoed, metal striking stone, heavy, footsteps in the night. Danger was coming. Daniel's hand went to his knife, but his eyes never left the girl. She clutched the half-eaten ration close, still watching him with hope and fear. The question still hung in the air, heavy, impossible, but also unbreakable. Would he leave her here to face the darkness alone? Or would he stay and face the danger that hunted her? The answer would change everything. The ruins were silent again, but Daniel's heart was not. It pounded hard in his chest, louder than the cold wind moving through the broken walls. He still could not believe what the little alien girl had said. Her voice echoed in his mind. Soft, weak, but filled with desperate hope. Will you be my father? Daniel's throat felt dry. He opened his mouth, but no words came. What could he even say? He was just a man passing through a dead place. He had no home, no family, and no promise to give. Yet here was a child, clinging to the last spark of hope she had left. The girl lowered her eyes, as if ashamed of her own words. She hugged the ration bar tightly to her chest like it was the only thing she owned. For a moment, Daniel thought she might cry, but no tears came. She had cried enough before, so much that maybe no tears were left inside her. Daniel knelt down, slowly, resting one hand on his knee. Listen, he said quietly. I don't know what you've been through, but you're safe with me, at least for now. The girl looked up again, her glowing eyes wide. She did not fully understand his words, but she felt his tone. She tilted her head, her lips trembling. Then, in broken speech, she tried again. Father, please? Daniel felt something sharp twist inside him. He had seen death, war, and betrayal, but nothing ever hit him like this small voice. He reached forward, not touching her yet, but holding his hand out in the space between them. The girl stared at his hand. Her tiny fingers twitched, hesitant. Then slowly, she stretched her arm forward and placed her cold little hand into his. Her touch was light, fragile, shaking like a leaf in the wind. But that simple contact spoke louder than any words. She was begging not just for food or shelter, but for someone who would not abandon her. Daniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to pull his hand away, to protect himself from the weight of this bond, but instead he closed his fingers gently around hers. At that moment, a sound broke the fragile silence. A rock fell from a wall nearby, rolling across the ground. Daniel's eyes snapped up. The girl froze, her grip tightening on his hand. Someone's here, Daniel whispered. He quickly stood, pulling the girl closer to him. His flashlight was switched off with a snap, leaving them in darkness except for the faint glow of her alien eyes. From the distance came the sound again, heavy boots crunching against stone. More than one. Voices followed, harsh and guttural, speaking in an alien tongue Daniel did not know, but the tone was clear. Hunters. The girl pressed her small face into Daniel's side, shaking. He crouched low and pulled her into the shadow of a broken wall. His hand rested on the hilt of his knife. The hunters' voices grew louder, closer. Daniel could see shapes moving between the ruins, tall figures with long weapons slung across their shoulders. Their armor glinted under the pale moonlight. They were searching. For her. Daniel felt her trembling increase. He leaned close, whispering into her pointed ear. Stay quiet. Don't move. She nodded quickly, pressing her lips shut. But even without sound, her tiny body shook so hard he could feel it. The hunters stopped nearby. One of them bent down, running clawed fingers across the dirt. Then he growled something sharp, pointing toward the broken wall where Daniel and the girl hid. Daniel's heart raced. They were too close. If they moved only a few steps forward, they would find them. He pulled the girl tighter against him. She looked up at him, her eyes full of fear but also trust. She was not letting go. She believed he could protect her, even when he wasn't sure himself. "Father," she whispered again, barely a breath, but enough to cut through the night. Daniel's chest burned. He had never been called that before. And now, with hunters ready to kill, this little alien girl had chosen him. The hunters stepped closer. Daniel gritted his teeth. If they came around the wall, he would have to fight. He was only one man, but he had no choice. He could not leave. Suddenly, one of the hunters shouted. Another had found tracks leading in the opposite direction. They argued for a moment, then their boots turned away, fading slowly into the distance. The silence returned. Daniel let out the breath he had been holding. The girl clung to him, her small hands digging into his shirt. "It's okay," he whispered, stroking her tangled hair. "They're gone, for now." But both of them knew the truth. The hunters would not stop. They would come back. They would search again. The girl finally pulled back, looking at him with watery eyes. Her lips trembled, her voice breaking. "You stay, please?" Daniel stared at her, his hand still on the hilt of his knife. He wanted to say no. He wanted to walk away and forget, but he knew he could not. Her plea had reached into a part of him he thought was dead. He nodded once, firm and steady. "I'll stay." The girl's shoulders shook, but this time it was not only from fear. A tiny, broken smile appeared on her face. For the first time in who knows how long, she believed. She was not alone. Yet above them the moon hung cold and distant. The ruins still whispered with danger. The night was not over, and Daniel knew. This was only the beginning. The night grew colder. The ruins around them seemed endless. Broken walls, cracked towers, shattered machines left behind by war. Daniel kept moving with the girl close to him, her small hand held tightly to his, as if letting go meant losing everything again. They found shelter in what looked like the remains of an old watchtower. The ceiling was half broken, but at least it blocked the wind. Daniel lit a small fire, from scraps of wood. The flame flickered weakly, but its light pushed away some of the darkness. The girl sat across from him, her knees pulled to her chest, her glowing eyes reflecting the fire. She had eaten the rest of the ration bar slowly, almost afraid it would disappear if she finished too quickly. Now she just stared at him, silent, waiting. Daniel studied her. She was tiny, fragile, but not ordinary. Her silver skin shimmered faintly in the firelight. Her ears were sharp, her hair long and wild, her body thin from hunger. She was an alien child, yes, but the pain in her eyes was something Daniel recognized from his own kind. He cleared his throat. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The girl tilted her head as if trying to understand. Then she whispered, "Lyra." Daniel nodded. "Lyra," he repeated. The name felt delicate, like something precious that might break if spoken too loudly. For a long time they sat in silence. Then slowly Lyra's lips moved again. Her voice was soft, broken, but full of memory. "Father, gone," she said, pointing weakly at the sky. "Mother, taken. Hunters." Daniel frowned. He leaned closer. "Your parents?" She nodded. A tear slipped from her glowing eye, catching the firelight. "They fight, protect. But..." Her voice cracked. She shook her head. "Gone." Daniel's chest grew heavy. He had seen many children lose their families in war. He knew the look, the hollow gaze of someone too young to understand death yet forced to carry it. "How long have you been here?" he asked gently. Lyra wrapped her arms tighter around herself. "Many suns. No food, no water, only hide." Her small shoulders shook. "Wait, for father, but he not come?" Daniel swallowed hard. She had been waiting in these ruins, starving, praying her father would return, even though deep down, she already knew the truth. Her hope had turned to desperation, and in her desperation she had looked at Daniel and called him father. The fire crackled. Daniel leaned back, his eyes staring at the flames. He remembered his own past, the squad he had lost, the family he once had before the war swallowed everything. He had walked away from bonds, from promises, telling himself he was better alone. But now, here in front of him, was someone who needed him more than anything. Lyra crawled a little closer, her small body trembling from cold. She looked at him again, her little voice rising. "You stay? You not leave?" Daniel met her eyes. For a moment he wanted to answer quickly, to give her comfort. But the truth held him back. Staying with her meant more than feeding her, or hiding her. It meant war with the hunters who killed her parents. It meant no turning back. Still, when he saw the fear in her eyes, he could not lie. He reached across the fire and touched her shoulder gently. "I'll stay, Lyra," he said, his voice firm. "I won't leave you." Her lips trembled, then curved into the smallest, faintest smile. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, like she was not used to showing happiness anymore. For the first time since they met, she spoke a longer sentence. Her words were broken, but Daniel understood every piece. "You are strong. Hunters fear you. If you stay, I live." Daniel shook his head slightly. "I don't know about fear," he muttered, "but I'll fight if I have to." The words hung heavy in the air. He knew they were not empty. Already in the back of his mind he could hear the hunters' voices, the echo of their boots, the promise of their return. They would not give up. And when they came again, he would not be able to hide forever. Lyra's small body leaned against his side now, her head resting on his arm. Her breathing slowed, exhaustion finally pulling her into sleep. She trusted him, completely. Daniel sat still, staring into the fire. He listened to the night, every distant noise, every shifting shadow. His knife rested in his hand, ready. He knew he should leave before dawn, but his heart refused. The girl had given him a choice without words. She had shown him her broken past. And now, by calling him father, she had given him something he thought he would never have again. A reason to stay, a reason to fight, a reason to protect. Outside, the ruins groaned in the wind. Somewhere in the distance, a howl echoed through the night. But inside the broken tower, the fire burned low, and for the first time in many suns, Lyra slept without fear. Daniel whispered softly, almost to himself, "You're not alone anymore." Outerwire. Flames flickered, shadows danced across the walls, and the night crept on. Danger still waited beyond the ruins, but within that small circle of firelight, a fragile bond had been born. A bond that would not break easily. The night slipped away, and the first weak light of dawn touched the ruins. Daniel had not closed his eyes. He sat against the broken wall of the watchtower, the dying fire beside him, and the girl, Lyra, sleeping against his arm. Every sound of the ruins kept him awake. The wind through the stone, the distant calls of strange creatures, the shifting of broken metal. But then a different sound came. Heavy, steady, cruel. Boots on stone. Daniel's eyes snapped open fully. He froze, listening. The rhythm was too sharp, too organized. Not animals. Not scavengers. Hunters. He carefully shifted Lyra from his arm to the ground. She stirred, her glowing eyes half opening, but Daniel pressed a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he whispered. She nodded, fear already filling her face. The sound of boots grew louder. Voices followed, deep, guttural, filled with anger. Daniel recognized them, the same hunters from the night before. They had returned. Lyra crawled close to him, clutching his shirt. "They come," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They want me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "They won't take you," he said firmly, but inside his heart raced. There were at least 3 of them, maybe more. He had only a knife, his strength, and his will. The hunters' shadows appeared between the broken walls. Tall figures in jagged armor, their faces hidden behind dark masks. Their weapons gleamed, a mix of spears and energy rifles. They spoke in their harsh tongue, scanning the ruins, their eyes sharp like predators. One of them growled, pointing at the ground. Tracks. Daniel cursed under his breath. They had followed their trail. He grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward the back of the tower. We have to move. They slipped into the rubble, crawling low, trying not to make a sound. Daniel's muscles were tight, every step careful. But the hunters were closing in. The crunch of boots was everywhere now, circling, trapping. A loud voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Then silence. Daniel felt the shift of air. They were close. Too close. He pushed Lyra into a narrow gap between fallen stones. "Stay here," he whispered. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." Her small hands grabbed his wrist. "No," she begged, eyes wide with terror. "They kill you. Stay." Daniel forced a small smile, though his heart was heavy. "I'll come back, I promise." She hesitated, then slowly nodded. Tears filled her glowing eyes, but she obeyed, pulling herself into the gap. Daniel stood, knife in hand, and stepped out into the open. The hunters saw him instantly, their heads turned, their weapons rising. One of them barked a laugh, cruel and sharp. To them he was only prey, a human standing alone in ruins. Daniel gripped his knife tighter. His voice was calm but filled with fire. "If you want her," he growled, "you'll have to go through me." The hunters laughed again, their voices echoing like thunder in the ruins. One of them stepped forward, raising his spear. He lunged. Daniel moved fast. His knife slashed upward, catching the spear shaft and pushing it aside. He drove his shoulder into the hunter's chest, knocking him back. The alien roared in surprise, but the others were already moving. Blades and rifles flashed. Daniel ducked, low, stabbing the first hunter in the leg. Blood sprayed, dark and thick. The alien screamed, stumbling, but another swung a blade toward Daniel's head. He rolled aside, the edge missing him by inches. The fight was chaos. Daniel's body burned with effort, his breath heavy. He was fast, but they were many. One hunter's rifle cracked, the energy bolt blasting a wall near his head, stone exploding into shards. Daniel dove behind cover, chest heaving. He knew he could not win this by strength alone. He had to survive long enough. For her. From the gap, Lyra watched with wide, terrified eyes. She pressed her hands to her mouth, holding back a scream. Her little heart pounded. She wanted to run to him, to help, but she was too small, too weak. She could only watch as the man she had called father fought monsters for her life. One hunter circled around, creeping closer to her hiding place. Lyra froze, terror gripping her throat. The alien's mask turned, eyes locking on her glow. Growl rumbled in his chest. He raised his weapon. But before he could strike, Daniel leapt from the shadows. His knife flashed, plunging into the hunter's neck. The alien collapsed with a choking cry. Daniel ripped his blade free, his face hard and merciless. Lyra gasped. He had saved her again. But now the other hunters roared in fury. They charged as one, weapons raised, ready to crush him. Daniel stood tall, blood running down his arm, his knife dripping. His body ached, but his spirit did not break. He knew this might be his last stand. Yet when he glanced back and saw Lyra's glowing eyes filled with fear and trust, he felt something stronger than pain, something that burned brighter than fear. He shouted, his voice echoing like thunder through the ruins. "She's mine, you won't touch her." And with that he charged forward into the storm. The ruins shook with the sound of battle. Daniel's boots scraped against stone as he faced the hunters head-on. His breath came in sharp bursts, his knife gripped so tightly that his knuckles turned white. 3 of them remained now, circling him like wolves. Their guttural voices rumbled in the morning air, promising death. Daniel's arm bled from a deep cut, but he ignored the pain. His eyes never left their masks. He was outnumbered but not broken. Behind the stones, Lyra hid, her tiny fingers pressed to her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Her glowing eyes followed every movement of the fight. The largest hunter stepped forward, holding a serrated blade nearly as tall as Daniel himself. He roared, swinging down with deadly force. Daniel rolled aside, the blade smashing into stone, sparks flying. He lunged back, stabbing his knife into the hunter's side. The alien howled, but instead of falling, he swung his massive arm and sent Daniel crashing against a wall. The impact stole Daniel's breath. His ribs ached, his vision blurred. He spat blood, forcing himself to stand again. His knife was still in his hand, his last weapon, his only chance. The hunters laughed, cruel and sharp. To them this fight was sport. They thought the human was nothing but fragile prey. But Daniel's eyes burned with fire. He had been prey before in battlefields where his friends fell one by one. He had survived then. He would survive now. For her. The second hunter raised his rifle, aiming straight at Daniel's chest. The weapon hummed with energy. Daniel dove, just as it fired, the beam slicing the air where he had stood. He threw a broken piece of stone at the hunter's head, buying a second of distraction. Then he closed the gap, driving his knife upward into the alien's throat. The hunter staggered, choking, his rifle falling from his hands. Daniel ripped the knife free, blood spraying across his arm. The alien collapsed, twitching, until stillness claimed him. Lyra's breath caught. Her little heart raced as she whispered, "Father." Strong. But Daniel had no time to breathe. The largest hunter roared again, swinging his giant blade in fury. Daniel ducked, the blade missing by inches. The shockwave of its strike sent dust exploding around them. Daniel slashed at the alien's leg, but the armor deflected most of the blow. He stumbled back, chest heaving. The last hunter raised a spear and charged from behind. Daniel twisted at the last moment, catching the shaft with one hand, knife flashing with the other. He drove the blade deep into the hunter's chest. The alien gasped, blood bubbling at his lips before falling to the ground. Only one remained, the largest, the strongest, his blade dripping with Daniel's blood from earlier. He roared, his mask cracking from fury. Daniel stood tall, though, his body screamed in pain. Blood dripped down his arm, his breaths ragged. His legs felt weak, but his heart refused to give in. He tightened his grip on the knife. The alien charged. The ground shook under his steps. Daniel braced himself, raising his blade for one last strike. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying, steel against steel. Daniel's knife scraped along the serrated sword, nearly slipping from his hand. The alien forced him back, strength overwhelming. Daniel's feet slid against the stone, his back pressed against the wall. The hunter growled, pressing harder, his blade inching closer to Daniel's chest. The human gritted his teeth, refusing to fall. Then, Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. "Father," she cried, her small body stepping from her hiding place. Tears streamed down her glowing face. "Don't leave me." Daniel's eyes widened. He saw her fear, her faith, her desperate hope. And something inside him snapped into place, roared, shoving against the blade with every ounce of strength left in his body. His knife twisted, slipping past the alien's guard. With a final thrust, he drove it into the hunter's chest, piercing through armor and flesh. The alien froze, his roar choking into silence. His massive body shook, then collapsed to the ground with a thunderous crash. Daniel staggered back, chest heaving, body trembling. His knife was still in his hand, dripping with dark blood. Around him, the ruins were quiet again. The hunters were dead. For a moment, Daniel could not move. His vision blurred, his knees weak. He nearly collapsed, but then small arms wrapped around his waist. Lyra clung to him, her little body shaking with sobs. "You win," she whispered, her voice broken but full of relief. You stay. You stay." Daniel dropped his knife, his hand moving to her hair. He stroked it gently, his breath still ragged. "I told you," he whispered. "They won't take you." Her tears wet his chest as she buried her face against him. For the first time since she had lost her family, she felt safe. But Daniel knew this was not the end. The hunters they had killed were only a part of something bigger. More would come. They always did. Still, as he looked down at the small girl clinging to him, he felt something he had not felt in years. Purpose. He was no longer fighting for survival alone. He was fighting for her life, for her future, and no matter how many hunters came, he would not let them take her. The ruins were silent again, but the silence felt heavier than before. The ground was stained with blood, broken weapons scattered across the cracked stone. The bodies of the hunters lay still, their cruel masks now lifeless. Smoke drifted from shattered walls where energy bolts had burned the stone. Daniel stood, in the middle of it all, his chest heaving, his knife still dripping. His body trembled from exhaustion. His arm was bleeding badly, his ribs hurt with every breath. But he was alive. More importantly, she was alive. Lyra clung to him tightly, her small arms wrapped around his waist, her little body shaking. Her glowing eyes were wet with tears, but she refused to let go. "Father, stay," she whispered again, her voice breaking. "Don't go. Please. Don't go." Daniel closed his eyes. Her words cut deeper than any wound. He had promised. Her safety, he had fought for her, but now came the question he could not escape. Would he stay? He looked around at the dead hunters. This was only the beginning. They would be missed. Others would come. Lyra was not safe, not here, not anywhere the hunters roamed. If he chose her, it meant war without end. For a moment, doubt crept into him. He had always been a soldier, a survivor, but never a father. He did not know how to be one. He had lost too much already. His own family, his own comrades. To open his heart again meant pain. And yet, to turn away meant leaving her broken, alone, and lost forever. Daniel felt Lyra's small hand clutching his shirt tighter. She pulled, back just enough to look at him, her big eyes glowing like tiny stars in the shadows. "You fight for me," she whispered. "You save me. You are father now." Daniel's throat tightened. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong. But he couldn't, not after what he had seen in her eyes, not after hearing her pleas. She had chosen him, not because of blood, but because he was the only one who stayed when everyone else was gone. He crouched down slowly, wincing from pain, until his eyes were level with hers. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Lyra," he said, his voice steady though his heart trembled. "If I stay, I can't promise it will be easy. The hunters will keep coming. Life will be hard. But if you want me to be your father..." She didn't wait for him to finish. She threw her tiny arms around his neck, pressing her face into his shoulder. "I want," she whispered fiercely. "I want you." Daniel's arms slowly wrapped around her, holding her close. His chest felt heavy, but not with doubt. This time with something else. Something warm. Something he thought he had lost forever. A reason to fight, not just to survive. He whispered into her tangled hair. "Then, I'll be your father. From now on, you're not alone." Lyra's small body shook, but this time it wasn't from fear. She smiled through her tears, clinging tighter. For the first time since she had lost everything, she believed in tomorrow. The fire inside Daniel burned stronger now. He was no longer just a wandering soldier. He was a protector, a guardian, a father. But as the sun rose higher, shadows moved at the edges of the ruins. Daniel saw them, dark shapes watching from the distance, then fading back into the wasteland. Scouts, the hunters were already searching again. He tightened his grip on Lyra. "We can't stay here," he said firmly. "We need to move." She looked up at him, fear flickering in her eyes, but she nodded. She trusted him completely now. Daniel tore strips of cloth from a fallen hunter's cloak and wrapped them around his bleeding arm. Then he picked up one of their dropped rifles, testing its weight. It was heavy but functional. He slung it over his shoulder. He had no army, no backup, but he had a weapon, his will, and the fire of a father's promise. He looked down at Lyra, who stood bravely, at his side despite her small frame. Her hand slipped into his, her fingers tightening. Daniel exhaled slowly. "This is my choice," he whispered to himself. No turning back. As they walked away from the ruins, leaving behind the corpses and broken stones, Daniel felt a strange peace inside his tired heart. He had chosen. The path ahead would be filled with danger, but also with meaning. Every step he took, he knew he was no longer walking alone. Behind him, the wind howled through the ruins like the voices of the dead. Ahead of him stretched a long, uncertain road. But by his side was a little girl with glowing eyes who had once whispered the words that changed everything. "Will you be my father?" And now, for the first time, Daniel had answered. Not with hesitation, not with silence, but with a promise that would define the rest of his life. He was her father, no matter what came. The morning sun spread across the ruins, washing broken stone in pale light. Smoke still lingered from the night's battle, the smell of blood mixed with dust. Daniel walked slowly, his wounded arm wrapped in cloth, the weight of a stolen hunter rifle on his back. Beside him, her small hand gripping his tightly, walked Lyra. Her steps were light but determined. Though tiny, she no longer looked like the same trembling child hiding in shadows. Her glowing eyes shone with something new, hope. Daniel glanced down at her. She caught his look and gave a small smile, shy but real. He almost smiled back, though his face was lined with exhaustion. He had made his choice, and with it came responsibility heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. They stopped at the edge of the ruins. Beyond lay the wasteland, an endless stretch of cracked earth, broken machines, and distant mountains. It was dangerous, wild, filled with beasts and hunters. But it was also their only path forward. Daniel knelt down, resting on one knee to meet her eyes. "From here on, we keep moving," he said gently. "There will be danger, but I'll protect you. Always." Lyra's little face lit with trust. She placed her hand over his, whispering, "Together, we go together." Her words, though broken, were strong. Daniel felt his chest tighten. He nodded, standing tall again. "Together," he agreed. They began their journey. Hours passed under the blazing sun. Daniel kept watch constantly, scanning the horizon for threats. Lyra walked close, never letting go of his hand. Sometimes she stumbled, her small legs tired, but Daniel lifted her into his arms without complaint. She would rest her head against his shoulder, and in those quiet moments, he felt something he had thought was lost forever. Peace. But peace never lasted long in this world. By late afternoon, distant figures appeared on the horizon. More hunters. Their scouts had found the bodies in the ruins. Now they were tracking, following the trail. Daniel's jaw tightened. He shifted Lyra into his arms and moved faster, weaving through rocky paths and old battlefield wreckage. His body ached, his wounds screamed, but he did not stop. He couldn't. Lyra clung to him, her voice trembling. "They come again?" "Yes," Daniel said firmly, "but they won't take you, not while I breathe." The chase lasted through the day, into the night. Every sound of boots behind them pushed Daniel harder. He found an abandoned bunker, half buried in the sand, and slipped inside with Lyra. It was dark, but safer than open ground. Inside, Daniel set her down and leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. He knew he could not fight forever. The hunters would never stop. But as he looked at Lyra sitting close, staring at him with those glowing eyes filled with trust, he realized something. He didn't need forever. He only needed to keep choosing. Choosing her. Choosing to stand, to fight, to protect. Every single day. "Father," she whispered softly, crawling closer. "You not leave?" Daniel reached out, pulling her gently into his arms. He kissed the top of her tangled hair, surprising even himself. "Never," he said, his voice steady and final. I'll be by your side. Always. She pressed her face against his chest, a smile hidden in her tears. Forever, she whispered. For a long while they stayed like that, the darkness of the bunker surrounding them, but the warmth between them shining brighter than any flame. Outside, the hunters searched. Outside, the world was still cruel. But inside, in that small circle of safety, a bond stronger than blood had been forged. Daniel closed his eyes, exhaustion finally pulling him toward sleep. But even as his body weakened, his grip on Lyra never loosened. He had been a soldier, a wanderer, a survivor. But now, he was something else, something more. He was a father. And no matter how many hunters came, no matter how long the road stretched, he would never let her face it alone. As dawn returned, Lyra woke in his arms. She looked up at him with her little eyes full of love and hope and whispered once more, "My father." Daniel opened his eyes, tired but steady, and smiled faintly. "Yes, Lyra, by your side, forever." And with that promise, they stepped out into the new day, not as a soldier and a child, not as human and alien, but as family, together forever.